Well, as this slide says, it's exciting times ahead. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but I know that God has plans to prosper each one of you in incredible ways. And so, looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about personal finance and stewardship, what that means for you as you head off into college and then onto the rest of your career. God does have exciting things in store for you. And hopefully, we'll set a good groundwork today on what that might look like and how some of the tools you might use to excel in that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Zimmerman. I'm the pastor of finance here at Eastview, and my background is all finance and accounting. And so, just looking forward to sharing with you some of what I've learned on my journey. And the first thing I want to do is congratulate each one of you. I want to congratulate you because you are going to be a millionaire. The truth is, in the United States, even if you only have a high school diploma in your lifetime, you will earn over $1 million. Those with college diplomas will earn well over $2 million in their lifetime. And so that's exciting. But with that certainly comes some responsibility. So I wanted to start off by congratulating you, letting you know what the future holds. And it's bright from a financial perspective, to say the least. In fact, if you go to some of the websites that are out there, you'll see like globalrichlist.com is a great one. You'll see that you are going to be in the top 2 or 3% of earners across the entire world in your lifetime. That's an incredible blessing, to say the least. But you need to be able to understand what that means and steward it well. I want you to be able to understand that the earth is the Lord's and all it contains. That's from Psalm 24:1. What it means is that we're just stewards of the resources that God entrusts to us. And a steward really is someone who is responsible for managing wealth, and in this case, God's financial resources. He's entrusting them to you to not only provide for yourself, but also to expand his kingdom. And so what I want to do is kind of lay a groundwork for you, some framework per se that you can use to steward resources well. It's not complicated, but it does take some effort. And so I want to lay out 4 simple steps for you. The first step is assessing your resources. Where are you at spiritually today? How has God made you up? And then where are you at financially? What has God entrusted to you? We just shared, you're going to be entrusted with potentially millions of dollars over your lifetime. But right now, at this point, 18, 19 years old, what do you have? What's God entrusted to you? We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then the next thing you want to do is determine where you want to be. What are your goals long term? Where do you want to be when you are graduating college? Where do you want to be when you're turning 25, 30, different points of your life? Having goals financially is important, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Then you want to create a plan to get there. A goal, this doesn't happen on its own. You got to have a plan. And when we talk about financial plans, usually we're talking about budgeting. Everybody loves budgeting, I know. Probably not, but some do. But anyway, that's a plan. It's a financial plan to hopefully accomplish the goals that you've set out. And then the fourth step is just simply implementing that plan and then tracking your progress. And the truth is, you do this all the time in many ways. I want to give you a real practical example. I'd like to lose some weight. I feel like I'm 10 or 15 pounds overweight, so I know where I'm at physically. I'm not where I want to be. And then I'm going to determine where I want to be. I want to be 15 pounds lighter than I am today. I want to be in better shape. I know I look pretty buff, but I want to be in better shape. So I'm going to create a plan to get there. I'm going to start eating healthier. I'm going to work out on a routine. That workout routine and that's kind of like the budget for the financial side. That's my plan. And then I'm going to implement that over a period of time, and I'm going to track my progress. I'm going to get on the scale and see how I'm doing. And that's the exact same thing that we do with our finances. We are going to kind of determine where we're at, determine where we want to be, create a plan to get there, and then we're going to implement that. So let's break these 4 steps down for you a little bit, and hopefully it'll make it a little more clear. Of course, you have to repeat this over and over. That's a good reminder. So when we look at the assessment side of things, assessing your resources, we're talking about spiritually, looking, how has God made me up? What are my tendencies? Am I cautious? Am I carefree? I would probably say most teenagers I know tend to lean toward that carefree side. Am I a saver, a natural saver? Do I like to spend? Am I tend to be kind of selfish with my resources, or am I really generous? And what I will say is there's kind of pitfalls to the far left or the far right of each one of these. What I've done is included a worksheet or an exercise that you can look at, kind of assess where you're at, and then provided some verses for you to kind of get a sense on where you're at and how you might gravitate more toward the center. I'm not going to tell you that you must be a cautious person or a carefree person. There's a place kind of in the middle there where uh, you're putting your faith in Christ and He's guiding you. And again, but knowing where you gravitate helps you begin to create a plan and understand where you want to be. The next piece is assessing your current financial situation. There's a worksheet in here that I'm providing called the 5S journey. Uh, it's going to apply to you probably when you're a little bit older, but it gives you a sense on where do you think you're at. You feel like you're in a healthy spot or not a healthy spot, kind of assessing what that financial situation feels like. The next piece is an inventory. What has God actually blessed you with? What resources do you have? Cash on hand, investments, debts, sources of income, bills. Those are all things that you want to have an inventory of. You want to know where it's at. And there's a couple of worksheets that will help you with this, 2 and 3 actually. And again, I will tell you, when you fill these things out for your own good throughout your whole lifetime, no secrets. If you can't write it down on paper, it's going to be hard to deal with. So always be honest when you're talking about your financial situation, especially with yourself. Next thing is you want to determine where you want to be, and this is really about establishing goals. And you'll see I put a few out here. Don't spend more than you make. Hopefully everybody has that goal. You want to maybe increase your giving. I put on here $10 a week. Save for emergencies, retirement, pay for college, save $10,000 for a car. One of the things you're going to notice about these is they're kind of like SMART goals. And what I simply mean by SMART is that they're specific and we can measure where they're taking place. I didn't say I just want to increase my giving, so I want to do it $10 a week. It's really specific. I can see if I actually accomplish that. And there's maybe a time for it. In this case, I'm hoping to maybe get that done in 2 or 3 months. Or again, the more specific a goal is, the easier it's going to be for you to attain it and know that you've attained it. And there's a worksheet that's going to walk you through this, worksheet 4 that I've sent out, and to start to establish what those goals look like. Well, so you have kind of assessed where you're at, you have thought about goals, and then you need to create a plan to get there. And I'm going to give you some tools to create a plan. Some of those tools include saving and investing. Debt, believe it or not, can be a tool. I put maybe there, but it can be a tool for accomplishing your goals. Budgeting, that's the written plan. And then technology. There's a lot of technology out there that can also be a tool when it comes to planning. And we'll look at a couple of those things as well. So let's talk about saving and investing as part of your tool for accomplishing these goals. The first thing is you want to maintain an emergency fund, and I usually say 1 to 3 months of salary is a good place to be, but you want to have reserves for when unexpected things come up. You want to start to save early and benefit from compounding returns. I'm going to show you a graph about that in just a second. As you get into a regular job, you're going to want to take advantage of employer 401ks, 403b plans. These are retirement plans where you invest in different things. And a lot of times employers will match those funds. You want to take advantage of that for sure. You're going to want to diversify your investments. And simply what I mean there is think of it as kind of a lot of eggs in several different baskets. You wouldn't necessarily want to put everything into Apple stock, because if Apple drops, then there goes all of your your retirement. And believe it or not, as solid as Apple looks today, there were periods in the 1980s and 90s where it almost failed entirely. So nothing is for sure, and the more you diversify, the more you spread things out, the safer it's going to be. And then you want to think long term. This is more of a marathon than it is a sprint. So you're going to be saving over 30, 40, 50 years of your working career. Let's look at what savings looks like for retirement. I use an example here of someone who is earning about $33,000 a year. It doesn't go up. That's just the way it is for the next 40 years. And if they save 10% during this period of time, in 40 years with a reasonable rate of return, they're going to have over $1 million in their retirement account. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It's not this isn't super secret math. Everybody can do this. This is how things compound. But what I want to show you is, I put a red line on here so you can see that over half of that growth happens in the last 10 years. It's in that kind of 30 to 40 year period that we go from just under $500,000 to a full million. And that's because all that compounding is taking place in the last part. And that's why it's so important to start early. You don't want to get a job right out of college and go, oh, I'll start saving when I feel like I have the money 10 years from now or 20 years from now. it will dramatically reduce what you have in retirement. And as a little point, this graph is based on saving $333 a month. For every $50 extra you're saving a month, that's about $150,000 tacked on to the end of this piece. So it could be very easy to save really millions of dollars, depending on how aggressive you are with this over your lifetime. And I put a note here, pause to revisit goals. So if you didn't have saving as a goal early, you certainly want to do that. Another tool I want to speak briefly on is debt, and there's a lot of negativity around the area of debt, but what I will say is that it can serve a purpose when used appropriately. And so I lay out a couple of golden rules of debt here, and I hope these will maybe ground you a little bit. The first one says debt should only be used as a tool to leverage your goals, not your lifestyle. To leverage your goals and not your lifestyle. Let me give you an example of this. You might have $300 to buy a phone, a smartphone, and that'll get you, I don't know what, an iPhone 7 maybe today if you're an Apple user, but you really want the iPhone Pro, and that's $1,200. So your thought is, I'll just borrow $1,200 and get the iPhone Pro now, even though I can't afford it. You basically leveraged things, you borrowed money, so that you can get something you really can't afford. And so the first golden rule here is only use it as a tool to leverage your goals, not your lifestyle. And owning technology that depreciates over time shouldn't be your goal. So don't think of it, debt as ever being okay for consumer items, okay? Lifestyle items, clothing, technology, things of that nature, okay? So no consumer debt. That's rule number one. Rule number two is, other than education and medical needs, avoid any debt that results in a reduction to your net worth. And you maybe haven't heard the term net worth. I just want you to think of it as, it's all the cash you have and all the things that you own, their value, minus what you owe on them. So for example, if I go back to that iPhone, I have $300 in my account and I borrow $1,200 to buy the iPhone Pro, which you shouldn't do. But now I've got $300 in cash, $1,200 iPhone, that's $1,500 in cash and things, but my debt's $1,200, so my net worth is still only $300. And the issue with this is that cell phone, as soon as you get it, it's no longer worth $1,200 anymore, right? I mean, it diminishes in value very quickly, faster than you're going to pay it off. So now, the moment you open the package and you start using it, it's worth $200 less or $300 less. All of a sudden, you have a phone worth $900, you have $300 in the bank and you owe $1,200, your net worth is zero. So by borrowing that money, you just depleted your net worth by $300. So the idea is, we're not going to take on consumer debt, and we're not going to do things other than education and medical. And I look at education and medical sometimes as necessary pieces. So ideally, you're able to pay for college as you go, but if you have to take out student loans, your ability to earn exponentially grows. If we go back to that first graph, your lifetime earnings could be easily double what they would be if you just move forward with a high school diploma. So it's an investment for sure. And medical, when we talk life and death, everything kind of, it's a different ballpark altogether. But these golden rules will help shape that. And what I want to show you is what consumer debt can look like. Because it's important, again, I have a note here, always make sure you understand and weigh all the risks involved with the decisions that you make. But credit cards are an example of something that everyone will deal with. A credit card is not in and of itself bad, it's a tool. And so credit cards, if used like a debit card or any other piece where they're paid off on a monthly basis, so we're not incurring debt or accruing it higher, amassing it, it's just a tool. And I don't have an issue with that, but many of them have a lot of rewards that make sense. But what I want to do is illustrate for you what happens if you make a purchase. Let's assume that you wanted the iPhone XS, for instance, and it cost $800. You paid $300 down, and then you charged the other $500 on this credit card. And you said, I'll just make the minimum payment on that. Well, I want you to see, if you only make the minimum payment on a credit card that charges about 27% interest, pretty typical, it's going to take over 2 years to pay that phone off. And on top of that, you're going to pay $150 in interest during that time period. So more than 2 years to pay it off and $150 interest. So that charge of $500 ended up costing you $650, and it took you 2 years to pay it off. And that's bad in and of itself. But what I want to do is then illustrate what happens when you continue to use that credit card. This graph shows you that if you make that $500 charge and then you continue to charge $15 a month, you go get a pizza once a month, and you just make the minimum payment, you will never pay that $500 off. You can see this green line just going up and to the right a little bit. It will never get paid off if you only make the minimum payment and you continue to use the credit card. And this is why people get in so much trouble with consumer debt and credit cards, because they don't pay it off in full, and they continue to use the card, so the balance is going up. In this scenario, over that same 2-year period, the $500 balance never diminishes, and there's over $300 in interest payments. So again, the moral of the story here is credit cards are a tool if you can manage it and pay it off every month. Otherwise, I would avoid it altogether, and it'll save you a lot of headache and potential strife in your life. So we talked about savings, and we talked about debt. We've got a plan. I'm going to show you a budget template in a few minutes that you can kind of utilize, shows how to make a balanced budget. But then you're just going to implement this plan that you've got in place. And you're going to want to track and categorize your expenses so you can see your progress. I put a couple tools out here. I don't expect many high schoolers to open up an Excel spreadsheet or start using Quicken, but there are some technology apps out there like Mint, which can be very helpful for tracking expenses and knowing where your account balances are. I often encourage people to use multiple bank accounts. Hopefully most of you have a checking or a savings account set up. And if you've got multiple bank accounts, you can kind of segment your money and have what your savings versus what you're spending. I think it's helpful. Dave Ramsey, if you've heard of Financial Peace University, maybe your parents have gone through that or they've even brought you through it, has cash envelopes, a system where they just work on cash only. I don't know if it's completely practical in today's environment, but it can work. It's impossible to spend more than you have if you're only using cash. So that's the beauty of that. And then one of the other things that you're going to want to do is find a source of accountability and don't give up. This is something that just takes time and progress, and you're going to work on it your whole life. And hopefully by setting up a few of these pieces we're talking about today, things will go much smoother for you as you move into college and then into your career path. So let's look at a financial scenario. We just talked about a lot of information, a lot of facts. So let's look at a particular scenario and run it through some of the worksheets that I gave you and how to do a balanced budget. So in this scenario, I've got Rich. He's a freshman in college. He works part-time, 12.5 hours a week at Chick-fil-A. He makes about $10 an hour, which equates to $125 a week or $500 a month. So we're using some round numbers. He has no debt, and his only monthly bills are a $45 cell phone, $10 Xbox Live subscription. He likes Xbox, at least my boys do, so I'm assuming Rich does. He also likes Starbucks, eating out with his friends, fishing, and mountain biking. So kind of to give you a little scenario about who Rich is. And then let's walk through some of these exercises I've given you in creating a balanced budget and assessing where he's at. And so this is one of the exercise sheets I give you on doing a financial inventory. And you can see we've written up the income sources. He's got a job at Chick-fil-A. He's earning money on a monthly basis, about $500. He's got bills, a cell phone bill, an Xbox bill, and you can see down here there's even a goal. He wants to start tithing and stay out of debt. But we're writing out, seeing it, getting it put in front of us, exactly what his financial inventory and picture looks like. This is what God's entrusted to him, and these are what his income is and his expenses, so he knows what he's looking at. And that's on that inventory exercise sheet. I said he didn't have any debt. If he did, that would be all line items here under the debt section. So whether that's college, home, car, credit card, medical, other. Again, hopefully these don't apply to you at this point in your life, and hopefully some of them never will. But you've got a spot to inventory that, and in Rich's case, he doesn't come into this picture with any debt. The next thing that I want to show you is just a simple tool for creating a balanced budget. And this is what I call our $1 budget. And this is exercise, I think, 5. And so what we've got is if you take this sheet, print it off, and you get $1 worth of change, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. Pennies, nickels, and dimes are easier to break up. But you get $1 worth of change. If you put that dollar into all these categories, it will always balance. One of the issues that people run into is spending more than they make And so they're over allocating. They're trying to, in some cases, this is that leverage idea. They're spending 110% of their earnings. And anytime you do that, that other 10% is debt, right? It's got to come from someplace. And so the goal is not to be spending more than you make, and to know that every penny is assigned. And so what this does is it helps you lay out what a balanced budget could look like. Top shows taxes. You can't get away from taxes, and typically this is going to be somewhere between 10 and 20% probably for you as you start out. So if I was laying out change, and I'll show you a final version here, I might put 2 nickels in this section because 10% of my earnings are going to go to taxes. The next section is giving, and I show 2 categories here because I want to challenge you. Church obviously is a priority, and the Bible teaches us to give generously to our church. It's the mission of the church that is going to spread the gospel throughout the world. But I put on here as kind of a target of 10%. We think of a tithe as 10%. But the other category, God's called us to be generous to the other needs around us. And so if you think, I'm only going to give to the church and then I'm done, we lose out on the opportunity to be generous elsewhere. In fact, I often encourage people to set up a savings account that they use just for other types of generous giving, so that when God presents a need, you might have some resources to help meet that. So when you see 2 things here: church, we're going to shoot for a tithe if we can, and then other is other ways I want to be generous, whether that's other mission support, helping a food pantry, just being generous with a neighbor or a friend. That's kind of the other giving piece. The next section is savings, and ideally, if we go back to that retirement piece, you want to be saving at least 10%. And it'd be awesome if you could do 15 or 20%, but you want to take part of that, every dollar you earn, and hopefully 10% of it you can begin to save. The next section is debt. Now again, in our case with Rich, he didn't have any debt, so I'm not going to put any change in this category. But if you had a student debt or some other type of consumer debt, you would certainly put it into this category. Note, a mortgage or a car payment will go into the living expense piece, but this is general debt that you have. In most cases, it relates to student debt, I think, so again, Rich didn't have any, so we're not going to put anything there, but if you did, you might have 5, 10, 15 cents of every dollar going into this debt category. The next area is living, and living I've broken up into housing, auto, food, and other. Housing would be rent payments, mortgage payments, could be utilities, anything related to your housing and your general physical living, the place where you lay your head down at night, okay? Auto is going to be car payment, it's going to be fuel, it's going to be car maintenance, anything related to your actual vehicle and transportation. If you don't have a car, but maybe you're in an urban area and you have a bike or do something that deals with transportation, you can broaden this category to all things related to transportation. Food is going to be groceries and dining out, and so anything that deals with food and general consumer pieces. And then other is going to be medical expenses, medications, could be insurance, some things like that that make up those other types of living pieces. And you'll notice at the bottom, I do want to point out, I've given some ranges of what this could look like. Housing being 25 to 40%, auto 10 to 15%, food 10 to 15%, other 5 to 10%. So I wanted to give you some ranges, some ballparks to choose from. Now keep in mind, if you're at the max of every one of these ranges, you will be well over 100%. So it's got to balance out. If you're higher in housing, then you need to be lower in something else. The last one is non-essential. Quite honestly, this is probably the one that a lot of teenagers tend to put the bulk of their earnings into, but we're talking about personal expenses, clothing, haircut, stuff like that. Fun would be those recreational types of things, travel, hanging out, movies, books, hobbies, things like that fall into these personal and fun categories. You're going to want to put something there, but notice this is the last category we get to. We've got to take care of all the others before we can begin to have fun and deal with some of those personal items. So here's what it looks like after I've put all the change out there. You can see I had 10 cents or 10% going to taxes, 10 cents or 10% going to church, 5% to other, and I only use nickels here, so that's why if you get into pennies, you can, of course, get very detailed here. Nothing in debt. Housing, in this case, I said there's nothing for housing because maybe they're living at home, and there's no actual housing costs right now. Living, I had auto costs, transportation 10%, maybe gas, 15% for food, or 15 cents, 15 cents for other, personal, and then fun. So you can see this is basically a balanced budget. Every dollar that comes in has been assigned to a purpose. What I do is I then take that and I create a model budget. In this case, I said detailed budget. I know his earnings are $500 at Chick-fil-A on a monthly basis. I took the 10% or 10 cents that was on taxes and I put it in the $1 budget side. And then I put the actual earnings, the 500, and I multiply it out. And it helps me to see what the actual budget would be for this, for Rich. So he should be spending about $50 toward taxes. So this basically, I use the dollar budget and this tool to create a monthly model budget that's balanced. And I only show you the first half of it. The other categories are on that sheet. The next piece is I take this and I compare it to what I'm actually doing. And again, it's one thing to budget. A lot of people find it very easy to budget, but it's another thing to actually follow the budget. And so what I've done is I've taken my model budget on the left, and then I track my actual expenses. So in this case, I said, well, his taxes were actually a little bit higher. He wasn't giving what he had initially planned. And I can begin to see the difference. Where am I off? Where do I need to make adjustments? In this case, maybe I need to budget a little bit more for taxes. I know I want to increase my giving, but I haven't been doing it, so that's where I want to make some progress. I want to compare what I'm actually doing to what I budgeted to do. And that's extremely important so you can make changes and know where you're at. And again, there's software that can help you do some of these things, but I've given you some exercises, some forms that hopefully you can utilize, in the coming months, maybe years, and kind of begin to hone this process a little bit. Well, what I want to do is just kind of leave you with some different pieces of information. Think of it as years of wisdom. I'm sure your parents have already given you quite a bit of wisdom, but if we're not careful, we certainly will model what our parents did, which in many cases is good, but if they're financially not doing some of these things, it's easy to fall into that track. What I want to do is just give you some takeaways to help you. The first reminder is, and this is so important, you'll never be more full of joy or closer in your walk with Christ than when living generously. In fact, I'm going to repeat that for you. You'll never be more full of joy or closer in your walk with Christ than when living generously. God has blessed you so you can bless others and be generous. That should be at the forefront of your heart, and that's what we want for you. We want you to live a generous life and to have a close walk with Christ. And those two things go hand in hand. So I know that as you plan and budget and all the things that go into managing and stewarding the resources God entrusted you, the goal is to live generously and see his kingdom advance. The next thing is learning to be content. We talked about the iPhone. It's so easy to want the latest, greatest technology. I mean, I often fall into that trap myself if I'm not careful. Learn to be content with what you have. And that is something that will serve you well. Pray and sleep on big purchases. If you tend to be a spontaneous shopper, pick a threshold and know that anytime you're going to spend over that dollar amount, you're going to pray and sleep on it and see how you feel in the morning. And it'll be amazing how much you'll save because God will show you that A, you can be content, and B, maybe there's something more important. So just know that. Be transparent with those who are part of your goals and impacted by them. I encourage parents a lot of times to share their budget with their children so they know what we're all working toward, what do the finances look like. But especially as you get into relationships and husband-wife situations, or if you're in a business partnership, being transparent with anyone you're partnering with who are sharing your goals is critical. A lot of times people will tell you their deepest, darkest secret before they'll show you their checkbook. And I encourage transparency. It's so freeing. Know that financial mistakes happen. Don't be too proud to ask for help. And that is certainly sage advice. A lot of times we don't want to deal with things that happen, and if you can just own it and ask for help, life will be so much easier. I'll tell you, there's people who want to help for sure. It's never too late to start savings. That's a kind of a cliche, but I talked about beginning to save early and compounding interest. You want to do that right from the get-go. And then my only little tidbit at the bottom here is that view real estate, which is owning your own home, as an investment. And I could go into a lot of detail on this one specifically. Some people feel like they haven't arrived till they own their own home. Just know, if you live in an apartment your whole life, that may be the best financial decision you ever make. But it depends on your situation, your goals, and where you want to be. And so just know that big purchases like owning a home, that's an investment in many ways, and you want to make that decision for the right one. Well, I know I've kind of used up all my time. What I want to do is just take a little bit here and just pray for you, and because I know God's got exciting things in store for you. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to pray for all of our graduating seniors, that you would guide them, that they would make you the center of their life, that you would raise them to be generous, that you would provide for their needs. I know many of the students here maybe don't have money in place for college, or they don't know where things are going to come from. Lord, would you provide for them in a miraculous way that they may give you the glory for it? And would they steward the millions of dollars that you're going to entrust to them in the coming years to advance your kingdom in incredible ways? Lord, we love you. We're grateful for all that you do for us, and we pray your blessing on them. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.